I believe that we are all united in wanting to have in place a framework that will help ensure that Singapore continues to have capable and committed leadership, not just for today, but more importantly, for the long term, for our children. This debate is important because it is part of the open and transparent process that we have engaged in over the years to try to determine political salaries in Singapore. I would now like to call upon this House to endorse these recommendations on salaries for capable and committed government as the basis for setting salaries for those holding political office.
It's a topic that's been debated in Parliament before, but this time Parliament debated the report of an independent committee appointed by the Prime Minister to review the salaries of political office holders. The 8-member team, led by National Kidney Foundation Chairman Gerard Yee, recommended cuts of up to 53%, the highest reduction since salaries of office holders were pegged to private sector pay in 1994.
The committee took some time to study this matter and has reaffirmed 3 principles as a guide to decide on the salary framework and where the balance lies. The government agrees with these 3 key principles. First, salaries must be competitive so that people of the right caliber are not deterred from stepping forward to lead the country. Second, the ethos of public service entails making sacrifices, and hence there should be a discount in the pay formula. And third, we should continue to have a clean wage with no hidden perks.
The new pay formula is based on the median salary of the top 1,000 earners who are Singapore citizens, with a 40% discount to reflect the ethos of public service. Before the review, ministerial pay was calculated based on the median salary of the top 48 earners of only 6 professions, with a 1/3 discount. The committee also recommended that pensions be scrapped. Political appointment holders appointed on or after 21st May 2011 will not receive any pension. Those appointed before 21st May 2011 will have their pensions frozen. Another recommendation made by the committee involved the calculation of bonuses. The GDP bonus was replaced with a national bonus that takes into account the socio-economic progress of Singaporeans. It will be linked to the real median income growth rate, the real income growth rate of the bottom 20th percentile, and the unemployment rate of Singapore citizens, as well as the real GDP growth rate. With the new formula, the Prime Minister's pay will be revised to $2.2 million from $3.07 million. That's a 36% pay cut. Ministers' annual pay will be reduced by 37% to $1.1 million, while an entry-grade minister's salary could start at $935,000. The President's pay will be cut by 51% to $1.54 million. The Speaker of Parliament will get the deepest cut of 54% to $550,000. With the new pay structure, the proposed variable component made up of bonuses and the annual variable component is capped at 13.5 months, down from the maximum 23.5 months of variable pay a minister could earn under the old scheme. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong also offered his opinion on the issue, saying it is vital to get a pay system which works for Singapore. He stressed that the issue wasn't just about how much money ministers will get. It was also about ensuring Singapore's future.
To consider the difficulty and the importance of the job of ministers, to think what quality of people you're looking for to be ministers, and to look at what capable Singaporeans are earning in the private sector and pay commensurately to get the best team possible for Singapore. So an idealist approach versus a pragmatic one. And each has its merits. Neither can be pushed to its limits. And the key is to find the right balance between these conflicting considerations. The right combination of idealism and pragmatism, and a formula that will work well and that our citizens will accept. If you look at my present office holders, ask yourself, whom have we brought in from where? We've got several from the private sector. We brought in Shanmugam, top lawyer. He was an MP for many years. Eventually we persuaded him to come in his late 40s. at the peak of his earning powers, when he took a very substantial pay cut to come in even to our pre-committee salaries. Dr. Ng Eng Hen, a very successful surgeon, also coming in with a significant pay cut. Mr. Gan Kim Yong in Nat Steel, previously in the admin service. Grace Fu in PSA. People successful, proven, now making a leap into what for them must be an uncertain new path. And not just a career, but a mission. In Cabinet, they're all making a far bigger contribution than they were making in any of their previous jobs. But in Cabinet, they're all earning much less than they were before they entered politics. I wish I could find more of them. I have not succeeded, and I did not find it easy, and I will not find it easy either. The civil service pay, while competitive, is not quite as high as the private sector pay. So when the civil servant comes in, the impact financially is not so great. But even then, when I bring in a senior officer like Heng Swee Keat, he will take a substantial cut, and now with this recommendation, a further reduction. It is not a light decision to bring in somebody like Heng Swee Keat from the civil service. He's been a permanent secretary. He was managing director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, responsible for the whole financial system and financial sector in Singapore. One of our top permanent secretaries. If he had not come in to politics, every chance of becoming head civil service. It's a big sacrifice for the civil service to lose a person like him. It's a significant sacrifice to him to come in from where he was and the grade he was, which he fully justified, to start as a new minister at the bottom and work his way up. But I was fortunate. I talked to him. Last time he was not ready, children still young. This time he was ready. He proceeded. And fortunately, I've now got a good minister for education. But can I do that a dozen times and get 12 such people into my cabinet? If not, how do I fill a cabinet? How do we make sure that there's not just education, but defense, transportation, national development, foreign affairs, the whole range are all staffed with top quality people. Paying people correctly is part of that answer. Not the whole part, but part of the answer. Yes, there will be always some able Singaporeans who are willing to serve regardless of the terms. And we treasure people like that. And when we feel them, when we find them, if they're suitable, we feel them. Because they are very special. But will there be enough of them to produce a whole team of ministers, a whole cabinet, equal to the task and with the standards which we have come to expect? And can we afford to risk the future of the country on the assumption that there's no trouble, we'll find them, salaries do not matter? From my experience working the system, I know it is not so easy.
Excluding the Prime Minister, 29 MPs debated the motion in Parliament. PAP MPs who previously opposed the old framework stood up to support the motion.
Some may imagine. So in 2007, the last time Parliament had this debate on the revision of ministerial salaries, I disagreed with the benchmark formula that the government used at that time. I consider it unrealistic to peg ministers' salaries to just the top 48% of people who change from year to year, since this is too small a group and variations may not be reflective of changes of salaries of the first 48 people used in the benchmark. I also said in 2007 that the Prime Minister should do away with the benchmark and just use the base salary of 1.2 million, which was set in 1994, to determine future salary increases. Just as a company which has a one-time exercise to determine remuneration policy, philosophy, I thought that after more than a decade of having a salary at that level, we had something that worked well for Singapore. So the 2007 adjustment was a difficult one to accept, as salaries at that time jumped based on the unrealistic benchmark formula used. I'm therefore happy that this has now been corrected to a more realistic level and which is more reflective.
When the subject of ministerial and top civil servants' pay was debated upon in April 2007, I was very uneasy. Till today, I believe that there are successful people in Singapore who are willing to put aside their corporate perks, their powered suits, to serve in a cause they believe in. Sir, 5 years on, I have learned to recognize my view, like the blind man describing the elephant, is but one perspective, based very much on my own values and season in life. Mind you, there are indeed people who would still give up successful careers to do what they believe in. In fact, just last week, another young banker hung up her corporate suit and joined the charity I run. But there are not enough of them. I could not find enough of them who had the right mix of passion and technical and leadership competencies I need to help me construct our dream 21st century charity and special schools. And finally, through a mix of monetary and non-monetary measures such as culture building, we were able to attract and retain barely enough talents to sustain our rapid growth in the sector that I work in. So I can imagine how the challenge of attracting sufficient people with the right character and skill sets to enter politics is multiplied. The new normal political culture appears to call for superhero politicians who are even rarer species.
After the break, the opposition Workers' Party sets out its position. 5 of the opposition Workers' Party MPs spoke on the motion and were quick to set out their positions. While they agreed with the principles set out by the committee, they criticised the formula by which political salaries were derived.
The Workers' Party view the committee's report with a sense of hope because it's a step in the right direction. We agree with the 3 principles that political salaries should be competitive, that political service is a calling that has its own ethos, and that wages should be transparent. However, the order by which the principles are applied has produced, in our view, a flawed new benchmark. Because competitive salary is placed as the first principle ahead of political service, the committee has pegged ministerial salary to the median salary of the 1,000 top-earning Singaporeans and then applied a discount for political service. If the new benchmark is accepted by the government, it will continue to send the message that top pay is the benchmark by which the caliber of the potential candidates, the importance of the office are all to be judged, and that the value of the political office can, in the final analysis, be monetized. Well, it cannot be, not even at the highest income levels. Political service is a calling. It is a privilege accorded by the electorate to serve as many of our Singaporeans as possible. It is primarily a privilege, not a burden or sacrifice. The principle of political service should come first and not be treated as a discount factor.
Mr. Chen offered the party's proposal on how it believed ministers' pay should be worked out. That MPs receive a monthly allowance of $11,000, the estimated salary of a senior executive in the civil service. And ministers' salary be pegged as multiples of this allowance, 5 times for an entry-level minister and 9 times for the Prime Minister.
Because political service is in the genre of public service, we propose a whole-of-government, people-up approach that benchmarks ministerial salary to MP allowance, which is in turn pegged to the pay of the civil service, benchmarked to the general wage levels. Because political service starts with our election as parliamentary representatives of the people, MP allowance should be the starting point. The cabinet is the constitutional extension of the parliament and the institutional expression that the legislature has control over the executive. It is not, the cabinet is not, an extension of the private sector. This whole-of-government, people-up approach is a pragmatic reality in many well-governed, developed countries and territories around the world.
Among a small group of 48
Non-constituency MP Gerald Giam agreed with his party member, calling the White Paper's approach fundamentally flawed.
This new formula still benchmarks ministers' salaries against the richest of the rich, reflecting an approach that appears to be based on a number of questionable assumptions. Firstly, it assumes that ministerial talents should first be found among the highest income earners. The paper states that the benchmark, quote, reflects the caliber of the people which Singapore needs for good government. Secondly, it expects most ministers will be parachuted in from the top echelons of the private sector, rather than going through the paces of being first elected as MPs, gaining experience on the ground, before being promoted to junior ministers, and finally, full ministers. Thirdly, it assumes that potential ministers are often reluctant politicians who consider entering politics to be a sacrifice and a burden, rather than a privilege to serve the nation, and therefore need to be coaxed with monetary incentives before stepping forward.
Mr. Giam took issue with the way the committee calculated bonuses for the ministers.
However, entry-level ministers' base salary of $55,000 a month already puts them among the highest wage earners in Singapore. So there is little reason why it needs to be supplemented by such a large bonus. To bring bonuses down to a more acceptable level, I propose that the total variable component should not exceed 5 months, even in a very good year. If all targets are just met, the payment should be around 3 months. This is in addition to their 13-month annual wage supplement. To encourage a whole-of-government approach to policy making, the national bonus should form at least 2/3 of the variable component, with the individual performance bonus making up the remaining third.
PAP MPs responded to the Workers' Party proposals, saying that the party's recommendations were actually not that different from the recommendations made by the Pay Review Committee.
However, in examining the exact principles used by the Workers' Party in its calculation, I actually think there is not that much difference between what the Workers' Party are proposing and what the committee in fact put forward, except that there is a small discount at each level. And the Workers' Party has also come a long way from their previously held public positions and pretty much abandoned most of them. So in that sense, I think the gap between members in this House has in fact become extremely narrow. Now, the Workers' Party said that the starting point of the calculation of MPs' allowances should be pegged at MX9 civil service pay grade. Now, I'm not a civil servant myself, so I just checked, and from what I understand, this is in fact not a wage that is at par with the average working level, as the Workers' Party have tried to represent. In fact, this is a wage that I understand is a super scale pay in the civil service. I think less than 2% of people in the civil service get this. So the Workers' Party's starting point is certainly not the average wage level as they have represented. It is in fact much higher than that. Because given how much common ground there is between the parties, it is stunning that he would actually want to oppose a motion that, in my view, is extremely progressive and brings us much closer to the Workers' Party's ideas than anyone has ever proposed before. Because by opposing the motion, what he's actually saying is that he would rather keep the existing pay scales than to move forward with the proposal the committee has put up. And I don't think anyone here would agree to that.
We started from the top, worked our way down. They started from the bottom, worked their way up. But we arrived at the same place.
When we return, the debate continues between both parties on the similarity of their proposals.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to...
The PAP MPs continued to argue that the proposed quantums were similar. The figures which the committee produced showed that an entry-level minister's actual total pay in 2010 was just over $1.5 million. Based on the committee's recommendations, monthly starting pay will be $46,750. The annual starting pay for ministers, including a 13th month bonus, comes up to $607,750. With the bonuses of 7 months as norm, as recommended by the committee, the annual total starting pay would be about $935,000. As for the Workers' Party's proposals, the starting pay per month is $55,000 and the annual pay based on 13 months is $715,000. With the Workers' Party's proposed 3 months norm bonus, the total proposed annual pay would be $880,000. The review committee proposed a cap on bonuses of 13.5 months, while the Workers' Party's proposed maximum bonus is 5.5 months.
What the committee proposes is using a certain segment of the pay and then bringing it downwards. What you are proposing is to take a segment of the pay and bringing it upwards. The point is, we all recognize that the way we factor in salaries for the public sector has to take into cognizance how the private sector pays, because you're drawing from a pool of people who can move between private and public sectors. At the MX9 level, obviously at the director level, it will be drawing from a pool of people of a certain age at that level. And then you scale it up. So in essence, what I'm saying is that while on the surface it sounds like it is different, but in reality it is very similar. And the numbers that is thrown up shows that, well, actually, we are all in the same ballpark, but we choose to perhaps, or rather, the committee proposes a model, but then perhaps you choose to spin it in a different way. The Workers' Party formula must come from some foundational perspectives. Either it chooses the market peg, which we have worked on, or it puts forward another basis altogether. Pegging it to the public sector sounds good at first glance. But it does not count because the public sector too derives from that market peg. So statements like, Cabinet is not an extension of the private sector. Again, it sounds very good. And we agree. But does it not then follow that under the formulation of the Workers' Party, that the public sector is an extension of the private? Surely not as well. Pays are linked across sectors not because the missions are similar, but because the empirical reality is that the same pool of people flow to either side. And there is no point pretending otherwise. I suggest that we are, in many ways, on the same song sheet.
By itself, the PEC says nothing about the value and importance of people at whatever level of income. It makes no value judgment at all. The correct way to think about the PEC is, would we like to draw our top political leadership from that level in our population? This is how sound HR practitioners think about salaries too, to peg them at a level which you want to draw people from. And then thinking about the proposals that have been put forward by members from the Workers' Party, well, as it turns out, the number that you have proposed to pay a minister is actually not very different from the number that the committee chaired by Mr. Gerardi is paying. And what that means, in effect, is that you are also proposing to draw from roughly the same population that the committee is proposing to draw from to fill our, political leadership. So how is it then that the committee's proposal is elitist, but then the Workers' Party then is not elitist? That is the part that I fail to understand.
But members of the Workers' Party continue to disagree.
It's not the numbers that's the issue. It's the principle behind those numbers. We in the Workers' Party believe that choosing the appropriate benchmark is critical as it sends an unmistakable signal when the principles behind your salary peg is at a level the average Singaporean can empathize with and aspire to. In doing so, we believe that the emotions that have justifiably bedeviled the debate on political salary over these decades will finally be assuaged. As many Singaporeans would understand by now, the Workers' Party proposals take their cue from the rank and file of the civil service. Ordinary, respectable civil servants who represent the spine and the spirit of public service.
PAP MPs also highlighted what they saw as a shift in the Workers' Party's position over time.
Now, let me also deal a little bit with some of the previous positions taken by the Workers' Party, because I actually think this proposal actually touched a lot of the principles that were brought up back then as well. In 2006, for example, in an interview, Mr. Lau Tia Kiang said that the minister's salary should be set at about 100 times that of a worker in the lowest 20th percentile. At that time, he believed that this figure was $800. So back in 2006, Mr. Low was actually comfortable with a salary of $80,000 a month for a minister. He also took out the implication of this. What he said then is that it also means that if the income of the lowest person in the lowest 20% rose by $1,000, the ministers would get $100,000 more, not just a year, but a month. So he was actually quite comfortable with having ministers earn more if the lowest income workers earn more back in 2006. In many ways, the committee's proposal actually takes this principle into account. It, in fact, pretty much says that the income of the lowest 20% have to rise. Now, it is, in fact, even less generous than Mr. Lau in two respects. One, the base pay is lower, and two, the actual bonus is capped. It's not unlimited, whereas in Mr. Lau's example, the upside would have been unlimited. So, in fact, the salaries are less generous than what the Workers' Party proposed in 2006 in many ways. Now, in the Workers' Party's manifesto, the position was slightly different. They actually said both in 2006 and 2011 that the ministerial salaries should actually be pegged to the salaries of foreign leaders with all their expenses and so on taken into account. Now, the reality is this is a notoriously difficult exercise, and I notice that the Workers' Party, despite having said this for the last 5 years, has not come up with a single proposal on what the numbers would actually be if this formula was applied. And they've had 5 years to come up with this. Now, I myself tried to do this exercise, and it was very, very difficult because a lot of the actual bonuses and perks are actually very obscure.
In his speech to wrap up the 3-day debate, Deputy Prime Minister Teo Chee Hean said that Parliament has made real progress on the issue of ministerial salaries. He also said both sides of the House have moved much closer together and noted how opposition MPs have agreed on certain elements proposed by the review committee.
For the first time, the Workers' Party has stated that it accepted benchmarks and benchmarking salaries competitively, similar to the approach taken by the committee, and is a fundamental departure from their past proposals. In the run-up to the 2006 general elections, the Workers' Party said that they wanted the benchmark to be based on what the poorest 20% of Singaporeans earned, and that ministers' pay could be multiplied by a factor of 100, making their salary at that time $80,000 a month. Subsequently, during the 2007 debate in this House, Ms. Sylvia Lim said that we should benchmark the remuneration of political office holders to that of leaders in foreign countries. The Workers' Party made ministerial salaries a hot campaign issue last year during the GE and proposed as an alternative, and I quote, that these countries pay political office holders just a fraction of what our leaders are paid, and we should benchmark against those countries. Sir, this is very different from what I just heard Mr. Giam say, that the position that the Workers' Party is proposing in Parliament is the same as what they had said prior to the GE and in their manifesto. So the Workers' Party has clearly made a fundamental change and taken a new position, which I hope they will hold to in the next GE. I welcome this change. This change has certainly helped this debate to move forward and arrive at areas of convergence. Nevertheless, what is more significant in this analysis is that the principles, as well as the way that the Workers' Party have worked out their salary proposals, are actually quite similar to what the committee has done. The principle of benchmarking by selecting a set of jobs, skills, and qualities which they feel are comparable, in one case to that of an MP, and in the other to that of ministers. So the basis for setting salaries is basically similar to that which the committee has used. So while the Workers' Party has previously expressed disagreement over not just the basis for determining salaries, but also their overall levels. I'm heartened now that the Workers' Party's own proposals are at the same general levels as those proposed by the committee. But what is most important is that the overall level of the salaries being put forward are both around the same general levels. The Workers' Party has quietly abandoned proposing salaries that are a fraction of what they are now proposing. They have indeed recognized that a pragmatic approach is needed when setting salaries. And they have recognized in their proposal that pragmatism and idealism need to be balanced. So I've gone through these proposals in some detail, not to point out the differences, but in fact to demonstrate the clear similarities with the committee's proposals. When we strip away the rhetorical wrapping and take a closer look, the Workers' Party's proposals are in fact based on the same set of principles, have taken into account pragmatic considerations, have resulted in salaries that are about the same general level, and have the same structural features of fixed and variable bonuses, though in different proportions, as what the committee has proposed. So I've pointed out these similarities to demonstrate that there is indeed much common ground. We should not be accentuating the differences when there are in fact so many similarities.
After the break, an exchange continued between the Workers' Party's Gerald Giam and Deputy Prime Minister Teo Chee Hean. In his speech, Deputy Prime Minister Teo questioned the Workers' Party's position to peg an MP's allowance to a senior civil servant of the MX9 or superscale grade.
The Workers' Party's new position is to peg an MP's allowance to a senior civil servant of MX9 superscale grade on the basis that it is competitively benchmarked to general wage levels of Singaporeans. So I would also like to clarify that the MX9 superscale salary is not pegged to the general wage level of Singaporeans. The MX9 superscale officer is not representative of an average whole-of-government officer. He is a senior officer with senior and significant responsibilities in the ranks of the senior leadership of the civil service. It is in fact pegged to the salaries of quite senior people in the private sector who hold jobs which have equivalent significant responsibility and scope. So, in fact, sir, the Workers' Party is proposing that we benchmark MPs, not ministers, MPs at the top 1.2% of the civil service. Now, about half the civil service are teachers, and we select our teachers from the top one-third of the cohort. So 1.2% of the civil service is quite a select group. But I leave it to members and the public to decide whether this is an appropriate way to compare. But, sir, I wish to make the point that this is quite far from the general wage level of Singaporeans and what the WP has described as a people-up approach.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the DPM for clarifying about the MX9 salaries. I'd just like to ask him, does he expect the MX9 salaries to rise at the same rate as the top 1,000 Singaporeans?
I think that there are a couple of questions here. I would also ask Mr. Giam whether he accepts that MX9 does not represent the general wage level of Singaporeans, as claimed. I would also say that I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell what salaries will do in the future. These are things which will have to be empirically determined at that point in time. I don't know. But the important point is the principle here. We have now all agreed that we do competitive benchmarking against the market. The committee's recommendation proposes that. The Workers' Party's recommendation, in essence, proposes that too, because the MX9 and in fact all civil service salaries are benchmarked against the closest comparables that we can find in the market. But does Mr. Giam accept that the MX9 superscale grade doesn't represent the civil service at large and the general wage levels of Singaporeans?
Mr. Giam.
Speaker, the MX9 formula is something that I thank you for explaining about the MX9 formula. That is not something that we had privy to the exact formula for MX9, but so I have no choice but to accept that the formula that DPM has proposed, the DPM has revealed in this House regarding what the MX9 is pegged to. However, I have no choice but to accept, because I do not know what I'm not privy to what the MX9 formula is, but we are under that understanding that it was more in line with general wage levels than it is to the top 1,000 Singaporean earners. And so does the DPM agree that that the top 1,000 earners in Singapore are, or rather the MX9 is pegged to a lower level than what is in the top 1,000 earners in Singapore?
DPM Teo.
So I accept that the MX9 is pegged to a lower level than the 1,000 top earners in Singapore. I think that's self-evident and everyone looking at it knows that. But I'm a bit perturbed by what Mr. Giam has just revealed. First of all, he revealed that he really didn't know what the MX9 superscale grade was, but then he's based his entire system and proposition on this. And he still hasn't answered the question that I asked him, whether he believes that the MX9 superscale salary grade is representative of the whole civil service and of the general wage level in Singapore, and therefore appropriate for use as a whole of government people-up benchmark as proposed.
Mr. Giam.
I think when we came up with the reason why we use MX9 formula, it was nothing to do with whether or not we felt that it represents the MX9 formula, the people who are earning MX9 are a larger number of people than the top 1,000 earners in Singapore. The principle why we took MX9 was because we felt that that would be more representative of the majority of Singaporeans rather than the top 1,000. And that is the reason why we have chosen that. It's not because we felt that it's a larger pool of people that we can deal with.
DPM Teo.
Yeah.
DPM Teo.
I will try once again to ask Mr. Giam and see whether he will be able to give me a direct answer. And the question I have is a very simple one. Now that Mr. Giam knows what the MX9 superscale is, does he believe that this is representative of the general wage level in Singapore?
Mr. Giam.
I don't think any salary formula can be representative of everybody in Singapore, but I feel that it's closer to what the general wage levels are than what the top 1,000 is. And it's impossible for me to have known that the MX9 itself is pegged to the senior management level of a certain grade. In fact, DPM has not even revealed what is that level that is being pegged to.
DPM Teo Chien.
So I must take it, therefore, that the answer, that Mr. Giam's answer is no. He did not know what the MX9 superscale salary represents, but nevertheless used it as the benchmark for the Workers' Party's proposals. And that too, he agrees with me that the MX9 does not represent the general wage level of Singaporeans. Useful one.
Deputy Prime Minister Teo thanked all the members who contributed to what he called a fruitful and useful debate.
I'm gratified that after the many, sometimes heated, emotional discussions over the past 30 years, we have now taken a major step forward to bridge the once wide gap. The government, by accepting the wide-ranging proposals that the committee has recommended, and the members on the other side of this House, by departing from their old positions and accepting the principles and many key features that the committee has put forward, as I enumerated earlier. So there will never be a perfect formula. As many members, such as Madam Halima, Mr. Faisal Manap, Mr. Bayam King, have highlighted and acknowledged. I acknowledge that too. So ultimately, this boils down to a judgment call in finding the right balance between recognizing the ethos of political service and providing an appropriate and competitive salary. And even the Workers' Party, including Mr. York, agrees the committee's recommendations are an improvement over the status quo. So the Prime Minister appointed a committee of independent persons to study the matter and make a recommendation. They've studied the matter thoroughly, consulted widely, and considered the views put to the committee carefully. They've exercised their collective judgment and come up with a set of recommendations which have found acceptance in large, if not most part, by members from both sides of this House. The government, on its part, is prepared to accept the judgment of the committee as fair and balanced. The government sees the committee's recommendations as a step forward. We are happy that the Workers' Party has also changed its position and converged more closely on the substance of the committee's recommendations. The principles which the committee has proposed and that both government and Workers' Party have endorsed are important principles to guide ministerial salaries in future. We hope that this will help to settle this important matter for some time to come and enable us to avoid politicizing ministerial salaries in order to focus on getting the best team to do the best job for Singapore and Singaporeans. So we have spent much time discussing this issue of political salaries in this debate over the past 2.5 days. It is an important subject that merits such a full debate. Let us now vote to accept the committee's recommendations and focus on the real work at hand. As members of Parliament and trusted by the people to be in this House, let us now focus our energies on our real work, which must be for Singapore and for the people of Singapore.
The question is that this House endorses Paper Command 1 of 2012 on salaries of a capable and committed government as the basis for setting the salaries of the President, Prime Minister, Speaker and Deputy Speakers of Parliament, political appointment holders and members of Parliament. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. No. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.